Hey, welcome to the Art Condition Podcast, a weekly show that will discuss the business, community, and often undiscussed stress and mental health concerns of being a professional artist, or even a serious hobbyist. I'm Joby. I've been in the tattoo and illustration professions for 25 years. My co-host is Moose, a data analyst, social media manager, and art agent. If you enjoy the content, please consider visiting the Patreon page in the show notes to help support the effort. Or if that's not an option, please like, subscribe, leave a good review, or just share with your friends. And definitely go visit the links of our guests on this episode. Thanks for listening, and have a great day. This week, we are talking to Blake and Gavin about Kickstarter. Both have run successful Kickstarters and have a lot of valuable info about how to get them started and optimized for success. Among many interesting topics, we cover details relating to profit and loss numbers, how to use analytics before and after your campaign, the value of advertising, and how to know where to allocate your time. We also talk about specifics like stretch goals, what they are, when they work, when they don't. What is it like to run Kickstarter as its own business model? And what do different size campaigns need for success? Lots more is on the way. Hope you enjoy. Here's the interview. Blake, maybe you can take us through it first, man. Give us a little bit of your personal history and how you got into art and where you're at today.
Ooh, that's a long story. You sure?
You got 2 hours.
Okay, good. Well, my name is Blake. I'm a fantasy illustrator. Currently, because things change constantly. Currently, I do a lot of freelance for private clients, mostly D&D characters. Actually, I've been doing that full time for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. About a year and a half doing that. But I've always wanted to be involved in art. I mean, I've been drawing since I was a child, as far back as I can remember. But I wanted to get into game design, but that just never, you have dreams of I want to be this, I want to be that. But then as you work towards those things, sometimes those paths change, or maybe your art actually isn't what you thought it was. And it turns out I was a little more character or illustrative oriented. And so lately I've been diving more into that path. Yeah, I tried to shorten it as much as I could. But yeah, that's what I do. I'm also developing a fantasy world called OmenShard. It's kind of slow going at the moment, but having a lot of fun with it as well. Experimenting with different products. I was also diving into conventions, but then of course, as I'm starting to get the ball rolling, COVID happens. So I'm like, well, maybe I'll just not do that and try other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, did I diverge too much from the question? Or are we good?
I give it an A+.
Okay,
10 of 10 would bio again.
Oh, okay.
Gavin, can you give us the same rundown, man?
Yeah. So I'm Gavin. I don't know, whatever. I'm an illustrator. I'm an independent illustrator, I guess. My entire illustration career, I've never really done any freelance or in-house work. Before that, I was a graphic designer, and that was at a company. Before that, I was a carpet installer. How far back you want me to go?
Go ahead.
I guess what sort of led me to being an artist, I think I've always kind of been artistically inclined, but growing up, I didn't know that illustration was necessarily where I was going to land. A lot of the reason why I wanted to draw was because I had friends that could draw better than me, and I wanted to be the guy who could draw. But I guess I just kind of stuck with it over the years and came back around to it after diverging into graphic design and a few other things. And then I started experimenting with game design, and I mean, ultimately that's kind of why I wanted to, I guess, be an illustrator in the first place. Was like everybody else, I wanted to work on Magic the Gathering and do all that stuff, and my style doesn't lend itself to be on Magic cards, and it took me a while to accept that fact. But once I did, it was like, oh, now the doors are open. Oh, I was like, I still want to illustrate games, but how do I do that? So I'm like, well, I'm just going to make my own games. So I don't know if that was coherent, but here we are.
Fantastic. Just a quick aside from Magic, you see sometimes that they're starting to hit styles that are outside of the, I'll put norm in scare quotes, for what you typically see on their cards. So I don't know. I feel like there's still options for artists that don't fall into those.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of kept an eyeball on it just because I've been curious. I know like Seb McKinnon's one that really is sort of outside of their norm, but other than that, a lot of the stuff they've been doing has been promo cards that have been really divergent, which is interesting.
Okay.
But
all right.
yeah.
The actual reason that you guys are here is both of you have a fair amount of experience with Kickstarter, and that's what we want to talk about a lot. If you could, maybe Gavin, you can start and tell us a little bit quickly about what your Kickstarter experience has been in terms of what the projects are that you've gotten off the ground and gotten funded. And then Blake, you can follow that, and then we'll talk a little bit about like what the research was and how you sort of prep for all of it.
Okay. I've ran 2 Kickstarters. The first one I ran was a very small one that was for a sketchbook of mine. And that was mostly just focused on my sort of core audience, right? So that's the people that are on my mailing list from conventions and people that are more close and just art connected. And then my second Kickstarter was for my first card game, which was considerably larger. It was we raised a little over $40,000, and that one was much broader. That was like, okay, let's actually try to find who the audience is for this game, and we did things like advertising and much more in depth video and things like that. So that's been kind of my 2 big experiences so far.
Cool.
Yeah, Blake.
My Kickstarter, I've done one, and it was my first one. Did it last year, and it was pretty successful. I did a deck of illustrated playing cards, based off just my own fantasy universe, and it was really awesome. We ended up doing just shy of $9,000 of a $5,000 goal, and it was great. And a lot of the research that went into it led to a much easier experience than I actually thought it would be. You think about Kickstarter and setting up, pledge rewards and calculating shipping and all these things. And it's like, if you just, think about it, if you just spend too much time thinking about it and not actually doing research or writing things down or whatever, it can get really overwhelming really fast. But the end result was much smoother than I anticipated.
While we have those numbers fresh in our minds, I'm just curious, what was the take home for both of those? Or did you basically just buy the product that you then had to sell later?
For mine, my take home was nothing, because I used all of the money to buy additional decks of cards to then sell later, to take to conventions or sell online or whatever. So if I didn't do that, if I just purchased decks that sold via Kickstarter, I think I would have taken home, I want to say something like maybe three or 4,000. But really, long run, I think buying the additional decks would generate more over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, similar on my end. The first one, my first Kickstarter, I think I raised around $2,000, and most of that I want to say at least half of it was profit, because that was mostly like I'm making just a small sketchbook sort of product, and I wasn't too worried about like ordering a bunch more to sell afterward. But the second Kickstarter with the card game was almost, I'm not going to call it a loss leader, but it was more like the goal was to get as many backers in as possible, keep the pledge levels low, focus on building a Kickstarter audience to then go into the second and third games. And we spent quite a bit of money on advertising. So take home on the, we raised a little over 40, but we didn't make any money. We basically broke even.
Where did the advertising go? Like what sort of advertising were you doing?
Okay, so we tried a bunch of different stuff, because with it being our first game, we were like, okay, how do you market a game on Kickstarter? How do you do this, right? So we did a bunch of research into what other people were doing. We hired reviewers to give us their honest opinion. It's basically like so there's reviewers for different card games and things, and in order to get in their queue, you basically pay them, right? It's not paying for a good review; it's paying to just be in their queue. So we hired, I want to say, 5 or 6 of those, somewhere between $100 and $500 each. Then we did a Board Game Geek homepage takeover, which was probably, well, maybe the second most expensive thing we did. And that garnered basically 0 clicks. That was in the $1,500, $2,000 range. We did a 24-hour homepage takeover at the beginning of the campaign, and we were going to do another 24-hour at the end of the campaign. And we canceled the end of the campaign because it just didn't bring anybody in. And then the rest of our advertising budget was Facebook ads, specifically Facebook, not Instagram. And those ads performed really well. So we basically ended up in a position where we had ads that we were, it's almost like if you get it tuned right, you're sort of printing money in a weird way, right? Where your cost for the game is X amount, and then your profit is Y amount, and then in the middle there's a margin of like how much you can pay to get the ad in front of people. And so we tried to maximize that amount so we could bring in as many people as possible, even if we weren't really making a lot of money on each of those purchases. We just wanted to bring those people into our Kickstarter ecosystem.
Blake, did you do any spending on advertising, or was it all social media, word of mouth driven?
I didn't spend a dime on online advertising. I wanted to see what I could do with just word of mouth, and I'd already been on Twitch for a while, and I had been working on the art live on Twitch all leading up to it for 9 months, I think. 9 months of working on that art. So in the sense that was kind of my advertising. Working on it live for 9 months before launch. But yeah, I didn't spend a dime. I just, posted on regular Facebook and Instagram. I don't think I even bothered with Twitter at the time even. But so yeah, I wanted to see what would happen. I bet if I did actually invest some dollars into advertising, it would have gotten a lot further. But even then, for just Twitch and then regular social media, I got I got 197 backers, so not bad. But yeah, it was all word of mouth really, and then Twitch. So I think I got lucky. If I did it again, I don't know if it would be the same level of success, or if I would have to invest into advertising then to push further. I'm not sure. But it was interesting. It was an experiment, and it worked, at least at this level.
Yeah, Gavin, the advertising that you did, was that prior to the Kickstarter for the Kickstarter, or after the Kickstarter for the continuation of the product, or both? Or
it was a little bit before and a lot during. So we did a little bit of advertising before, which in this next game we're going to end up doing more of a lead up than we did. A lot of it was that we were still just trying to get our feet under us and figure out how do we even get this thing accomplished. It's basically me and one other guy doing the entire thing. So we're like, okay, how do we just make sure that we're looking like we're not just coming out of nowhere. So we did some advertising to get some likes on our Facebook page and just sort of build up a little bit of a buzz and make sure if people were trying to find us, they could see us and be like, oh, these guys, they have some kind of presence. And then that's where we focus the majority of our money. Just to get people into the Kickstarter, get us pushed up higher in the Kickstarter rankings, get into the trending sections, things like that. So
I had heard that the majority of the success of a Kickstarter comes in the first day. So
yeah,
would it make sense to do advertising more beforehand rather than during, so you can get that big boost at the start?
You definitely want, a big boost at the start, because that's what's going to push you into the higher trending sections and stuff. I know things have changed a little bit since we ran ours. We ran the Kickstarter for this back in 2017, so the trending sections and things are a little bit different now. But at the time, it was really focused on how many people are backing this project, how much buzz is happening very early on. And we actually got pushed up into the first page of the trending section in games when we on the first day or so. and we were like, oh man, this is great, okay, this is perfect, it's right where we want to be. And then we're like, maybe we can take the gas off the Facebook advertising a little bit, because we were spending a lot of money early on. And so we're like, okay, let's take the gas off just a little bit. And we did. We started falling out of the section. And once we started falling, it was really hard to climb back in. So don't take your foot off the gas.
Gavin, totally unrelated to anything, David Peterson is in the chat, and he says that I want Gavin to know that I'm silently judging him with my eyes from the doorway.
That's an inside joke.
Yeah, I figured that it was. And it would make it that much more odd, which is why I wanted to read it.
Yeah. Nice. What's up, David?
I want to highlight that thing that both of you sort of touched on, as far as, how much you guys made. And I think it's an important point, because I hear it a lot, and it's can serve two purposes. One, from an outside point of view, oftentimes people will see the numbers that a Kickstarter generates. $40,000. Oh my God, they got rich.
Yeah.
What Blake funded in like 9 hours, and oh my God, he just made thousands of dollars in 9 hours. Why do Kickstarter is a Ponzi scheme? I mean, I don't know. I actually haven't heard that very much, but it's, to a similar effect, that people are like, mind blown. But what you guys were talking about, there's so many other things that are involved that maybe people aren't aware of. And I think that going into it, whether you're going to start a Kickstarter, or you're thinking about contributing to someone's Kickstarter, or you're just observing the whole Kickstarter ecosystem, it isn't just people just making thousands of dollars. These are almost like startup funds that are then getting plugged back into the product to further it. It's all part of the big business model. It's not a money-making machine in and of itself.
Not early on.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly right. Like the Kickstarter, I had a goal of $5,000, and that goal was to cover the print cost of the 1,000 decks of cards I wanted to buy. I mean, that was the actual cost. So that's like irrespective of even shipping. Now, if I did not get that $5,000 goal, I would have gotten, a lot less decks of cards, obviously, and then, done something different. But since I met that $5,000 goal, I'm like, okay, can we do this? And I was wondering if I was gonna have to. I mean, I would have eaten shipping and everything, but then that last $4,000 that I got beyond that goal was able to cover everything, which was good. But yeah, like, I got those reactions a lot. People were like, congratulating me. People who didn't understand. It's like, like I was very happy this was successful. This is awesome. But I did not make $1,000 an hour. Like that's not what happened there. I came out with like, almost no money, and that money is longer term. But yeah.
I heard a piece of advice a long time ago. I can't remember where I heard it from. It may have been Seth Godin, because I like that guy a lot. But he basically says, like, try to not make money as long as possible. Like, as long as you can just keep reinvesting and building and building and building, that's what you should be doing. So that was really our goal going into the game Kickstarter. Our funding goal was $29,000, which is pretty lofty, especially for a very first project on that account. And so we built in, like, okay, the printing cost of the game, which was substantial. I mean, I think it was the majority of that cost was just getting the game printed, and it was only two decks of cards, a rule book, a box, and one special card that was just a larger card. And the minimum order is difficult. I think it was probably 1,000 or 1,500. And getting over that, like, okay, now we can actually order the product hump, right? And then we also built shipping costs into the campaign, because we wanted to save free shipping. We wanted to be like, all right, free shipping, and then if you're shipping anywhere in the world, it's like an extra $2 or something. We tried to really hone in on, like, okay, how do we do distribution in a way that is scalable, and get as many initial backers in here as possible. So my business partner he works in logistics, so he kind of knew what we were getting into, and he was the go-to for all of our distribution worldwide. So we had distributors in like Australia, the UK, Canada. I don't think we did China, but basically like all over the place, right? So basically we had the game printed from this company named Panda, who's in Canada, but they are a go-between Canada and China. So the game's printed in China, and then from China, it's sent to our distributors in other countries so that we don't have to pay to ship it to us and then pay to ship it back out. And so, yeah, so much of this was just infrastructure building and figuring out like, okay, if this thing had really gone gangbusters, now we know how to fulfill it, right?
So both of you guys mentioned shipping and handling being a big chunk of cost, right?
Yeah.
But does Kickstarter also take 30% of the money that's paid to be put towards shipping and handling?
Good question.
Yes, because the number that's like funded on Kickstarter, the number that you see, the backers pledged this dollar amount, Kickstarter takes a percent cut from that total. So if you have, say I'm going to pledge, $15 or more for one deck of playing cards, the shipping that's tacked on to that cost goes into your pledge total, and then Kickstarter takes the cut from that. So yes, Kickstarter is taking a portion of that shipping cost, which kind of sucks. There are ways around that through third-party systems or whatever, but I wasn't aware of that at the time.
The thing that I'm not sure of, though, is if you run your campaign where people pay for shipping post-campaign, like you're talking to like if you did it through a pledge manager, right, Blake?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because I didn't do it through Pledge Manager. It was just all through. Everything was Kickstarter.
Everything was Kickstarter. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you do your shipping like while the campaign was running? So if somebody backed it, they also paid for shipping right then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So then all of that money, Kickstarter takes a cut of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there are definitely ways around it, and I wish I had known that at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like I said, we built in shipping into the cost of our game, so obviously Kickstarter was taking a chunk of it.
Yeah, I wish I could do it that way, like offer that free shipping. But with like decks of cards, I can't put the shipping cost into the deck of cards because like the deck of card kind of community on Kickstarter.
There's only so much money. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and like you have to price it at a certain bracket, otherwise nobody's gonna.
People are like, "Why is this deck of cards $25?" I don't understand.
Exactly. That was my original plan. I'm like, I'm going to do a $20 deck because this is going to be nice, right? But then I look at all these other decks that are like primo,
really nice,
insane, and they're going for like 15. I'm like, oh gosh, okay, man, I guess I gotta,
Well, that's also like a volume thing, right? Like you can end up in a scenario where since we're smaller size Kickstarters, you can only order a minimum amount, but if you could order a ton more, the price per unit comes way down. So
yeah,
just things to think about.
Yeah, which is also why I ended up pushing up to getting 1,000 decks versus like just what was ordered. If I only bought what was ordered, I think it would have been like 400 decks of cards. So obviously a significant price difference, but then the price per deck would have gone up if I went with only what was ordered. Yeah. So getting the 1,000 was like, yeah.
To like reinvest, right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So I guess this slides right into a follow-up question of what did you guys learn from running your first Kickstarters that you can move on to your next Kickstarter?
Everything. Yeah, like I said, our whole first Kickstarter moving into the game space was about like how do we do this on a larger scale as we continue to build. So we shot our own Kickstarter video. I did all the graphic design. We did all the advertising. And we did the shipping. Like the two of us literally did everything. So, yeah.
Yeah. I learned a lot. Well, it started just with thinking about like what kind of stuff I want to make, right? And really just kind of happened all of a sudden. Like I was hanging out with my family. We were playing cards, and I've played cards my whole life. Like that's just like a family thing that we do. And then I was starting doing conventions, and and I was just thinking about like what products I can do besides prints, because like my prints don't really move. So like what other things can I do? And then I'm just sitting there looking at these playing cards. I'm like, you know what, this will work. And so I just took that idea and then did lots and lots of research. I can't tell you how many different Kickstarters I read and studied, and looked at their pledge tiers and looked at this and watched hours of YouTube videos on how to calculate shipping, how to prep your kick leading up to this. What's up?
We lost
you. You froze for a second, but I think you're good.
Oh, now. I did. Sorry. I to do a lot of learning, like how to video edit. My Kickstarter video isn't that great, but like I had to learn how to do that for this Kickstarter and all kinds of things. I had to learn, and luckily I also have a background in graphic design, so like that wasn't too difficult. Like I could do some of that. But doing everything yourself, it can be kind of overwhelming. But with everything that I learned, the next one is only going to be better. It's going to be quicker. It's going to be more efficient. I'll have a better idea of the costs involved. Just like what I talked about with shipping, I'll know that I could charge that after, or using things like a backer kit or whatever they're called. Also learning about things like customs. I bought my deck, my decks internationally, and ended up being $5,000 worth, and customs didn't like that very much. So I guess there's like a $2,000 limit or something like that before they start asking questions. Yeah. And I got a phone call while I was at a convention, and it was kind of scary, but ended up being fine. But yeah, so like little things like that, even though it wasn't anything. Like I was really lucky in that nothing was detrimental. Mm-hmm. I didn't make any, glaring mistakes.
I made a big one, but we can come back around.
Yeah, I'll want to know about that. But yeah, so the things that I've learned will definitely make the next Kickstarter easier, I think, and better overall. Yeah. So yeah, what happened, Gavin?
Okay, so I actually I had blocked it out of my memory, but
I'm sorry to open the wound.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It didn't cost money; it cost time. So
time is money.
Yeah, exactly. So we had a kind of a harebrained idea to try to push the game's marketing. We did this thing that was so the game's called Bullets and Teeth. And it's the first one is like a kind of a zombie survival horror, whatever. It's in the vein of like Ash versus Evil Dead, that kind of stuff. And so we were like, well, what if we had people like make themselves look like zombies and then post pictures on social media, and maybe we could drum up some kind of something. I don't know, like at least get people to say something to their own friends group, right? This is a terrible idea. But the worst part was we were like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pick a few, like our favorites, and we're going to put them on one of the cards, right? So one of the cards is just like a basic group of zombies called Shamblers. And so we're like, we'll take these pictures from our backers and we'll find the best ones, and then I'll draw them as zombies on the card. And sounds cool, right? Maybe. This project like extended our timeline by like 3 months because we had to find like the best photos, and then I'm like, now I have to figure out how to put them on a card, and like am I gonna like and then we had to like contact all the people and make sure we had permission to use the photos, even though they sort of just did it. It's like, okay, let's make sure that everything's cool, and like, it was a mess. So don't do that, but also don't bloat the scope of your project past its deliverables, right? Like,
yes,
stretch goals, I think, do this, are like sort of notorious for doing this, but make sure that I almost want to say try to have your project 100% done before you even kickstart it. Like, it's done, ready to go. This is just to fund it. And then especially with the first one, because things get crazy after the project's done, because there's just so much going on. There's people messaging you. There's people calling you on the phone, like customs, right? Like there's just so much going on post project that things get pushed off. And then there's horror stories where people have taken years to fulfill their Kickstarter, even when it's been super successful. So don't do that, especially with the first one. because that first one is the first impression, right? It's like
Yes.
you want to be on time as much as possible, and we built a buffer a little bit into our delivery date. I think we said we'd ship within like 6 months after the Kickstarter, but we could have shipped within probably 4 if we hadn't done this project. So this little add-on, it's like, ugh, it's bad. It was bad.
So to that concept of bloat, like, and the advice,
Yeah.
to don't do that. How do you know if you're doing that or not? Because stretch goals look real tempting, and you start thinking about all of the fun things that you can do. You guys have tips or suggestions for how people can anticipate the amount of time that is going to be involved, understanding that there's no universality. Everybody's Kickstarter is different. There's no silver bullet. But if we're going to say don't do something, is there some way that we can help people sort of like objectify what it is they're going to be getting themselves into?
Mm-hmm. Just pay attention to the math of it, right? Like on my Kickstarter, I had a couple of stretch goals on there, but we didn't meet them because I set them pretty high because I wanted to, if we hit them, cool, but if not, I won't be hurt. Like one of them was like, little custom seals on the deck. And that would have been like, I think it's like a 10 cent per deck difference, which really isn't that big of a deal. And it costs me no time. Like that's a stretch goal that, looks nice, but it isn't something that's going to make or break me. Right. Whereas if I'm doing, this silly idea I heard about where you take somebody's photo where there's zombies and try and put them on a card. Like, that's a lot of time. That is a lot of extra time and expense for something that may not work. What you can do instead are things like add-ons. For example, for my Kickstarter as well, instead of it being a stretch goal, I did an add-on where if you want to buy a single custom card, you pay an extra $200 or an extra $300 or whatever, and then you get like one additional special card. But that's not a stretch goal; that's an add-on. I've seen people ruin themselves with stretch goals that end up costing so much time and money that it way exceeds the original cost of the pledge, and then you're the artist or whatever is bleeding themselves dry trying to get these things done that they promised because they didn't expect that they would actually meet the stretch goal, or they just don't think about it enough, because that was probably one of the hardest things of setting up the Kickstarter is thinking, what in the hell could I do? Like, what do I want to do for a stretch goal? I don't know what I want to do. And so people just write random things that sound cool and then not think, oh, wait, what if this actually happens? What if we make it? Can I do what I promise? And that's scary.
So when we built our campaign, we had 2 tiers, and that was it. It was the base game, and then it was the like special edition that was only available on a Kickstarter. And the stuff that we built into the game, the special edition was like a special box cover, like the cover of the box was different, and then it was a play mat, and then a foil. There's a special card called the bait, which is like how the game's played. The bait card gets passed around the table, and that's who's about to get eaten by the zombies. So we're like, well, let's try to make that look cool. So we had a special bait card, and the playmat was a terrible idea because it weighs a lot. So try to keep that stuff in mind. You also have to think about like things that will fit in the box to be shipped, because anything that changes any kind of shipping variable is very difficult. I think people get into problems with stretch goals because of that. It's like there's so many factors to think of that I think especially for a first project, I would almost say, and this is what just because of my experience, is that I wouldn't even do stretch goals. We did a few, and it was only because, like, initially at the beginning of the project, I was like, I don't think we should do stretch goals. And, my business partner are talking back and forth about it. And eventually we were like, well, everyone else in the games space does stretch goals. And I was kind of like, okay, I don't want to, but let's go ahead and put a few in there. And all we really did was like upgrades to the game itself. So it was like a nicer box or upgraded card stock, and then we were going to do like linen texture on the cards, and like eventually we're up to like magnetic box, clothes and stuff like that. But we didn't end up going that high. That was stuff we had set much higher. And we knew the cost of all that stuff going into it. It's like, okay, this is going to add this much cost, so we're going to set it at this amount. But it just sort of adds as unnecessary complication. And then also you have to explore all of those things before you say, yes, we can do this. Because one of our stretch goals was linen card texture on our cards. And we ordered a sample of it. That's one of the stretch goals we hit. Sample shows up and I look at the card and I go, this won't work. It makes the art look terrible. Right? Just because like the texture, the linen texture on the card like washes the artwork out and it just looks really bad. And so we're like, okay, well, now we have to go back to our backers and say, hey, this linen card texture doesn't work, but we're going to do this instead. And so I think we ended up just upgrading the card stock or something instead. I don't remember exactly. But and backers were totally cool with it. It was no big deal. Nobody was mad.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. So,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, you're good. You're good.
That's the thing too. Like, do your research, do your test prints. Like, be patient with it. If your Kickstarter isn't ready, then don't do it yet.
Yeah,
it's okay. Like I ordered, gosh, probably maybe $200 worth of samples, which isn't very much. Like I've talked to board game people who have spent thousands of dollars on prototyping and stuff. But you have to do that because if your product isn't right, then when people finally back it and then you ship it out, even if you know it's not right, some people are going to have some issues with it, and I wouldn't blame them. But yeah, if you're going to do stretch goals and things too, order samples of those stretch goals to see if it's actually something that'll work.
Yeah.
Now, can I dig into that idea of stretch goals just a little bit more? Because you were against it. Your business partner kind of talked you into it. Do you have a sense of how Kickstarters that don't have stretch goals do compared to those that do incorporate them?
So in the board game space, I'm not so sure because so many board games do Kickstarter or do stretch goals. Like it's basically like every board game does stretch goals, and it's a lot of times what they'll do is they'll make an expansion for their game and then they'll piece it into their stretch goals so that like they're slowly sort of feeding in expansion content. Okay. Or sometimes it's like, oh, here's a whole expansion, and then now everybody just gets that included. And it's things that like, it almost feels like day one DLC for video games where like it's something that either could have been in the game, but they withheld it to use it as an incentive, or it's an expansion that wasn't tested enough, or like there's all these things that can go wrong that for me, I was like, there's just too many variables here for us. But that's going up against what everybody else is doing. So in the board game space, I don't know. But in the art space, I know that I don't think stretch goals really even matter at all in the art space.
I agree.
A lot of the projects I've seen from artists that there's, I don't feel like there's even much of a difference as far as the campaigns and the amount they can raise. I've seen really, really successful artist Kickstarters that don't have stretch goals. So
yeah, I don't think you need stretch goals to convince your fans to buy from you. They already want to support you. So
that might be the biggest difference too, is like who you're marketing to.
Yeah. Board games, you're trying to get as many, as many people as possible. The likelihood of you having those fans buying from you directly is a lot, or at least the percentage is a lot lower. Whereas like, an art deck or prints or your art book, that's much more marketed to your fan base that already exists. Plus whoever wants to buy it, of course. But yeah.
And sort of anecdotally, of course, but like I do wonder if it's a matter of if your target audience is narrow, right? It's like, okay, I'm gonna go narrow and deep on this target audience, so I'm gonna try to get a higher amount per backer with this audience versus going wide and trying to get a smaller amount from a lot more people. Yeah.
So I guess the lesson there is think about what kind of product you're going to be putting up, and then look at, as part of your research, look at other similar products and see what they've done. Is there any sort of credence to tracking down the actual people that have been involved in other Kickstarter projects and hitting them up for info? Was that something that you guys did or have heard about doing?
I mean, I know a lot of artists that have run Kickstarters, so that's where the majority of my info came
Uh-huh.
from. I didn't really track down anybody in the board game space. Most of that research was basically just looking at other successful Kickstarters and trying to glean, like, well, why did they do this? Why did they do that? And why does this cost this much? And most of that stuff came to light because of product research. It was like, okay, well, yeah, obviously the goal is 29,000 because that's how much money we have to raise due to all these different costs. So
Yeah, I didn't really talk to any anybody specific about like a playing card Kickstarter. I did talk to you, Gavin, actually about Kickstarter generally. We had a Hangouts call a long time ago, but yeah, it was just like no, it was good. It was good because I just thought, you know what, maybe I'll try a Kickstarter, and I knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
And so talking to you helped me generally understand what Kickstarter was about, especially when you started talking about, goal versus cost and things like that. And
Yeah.
so that helped a lot. But as far as like, somebody in like who did a playing card Kickstarter, I didn't talk to anybody. I probably could have, but mostly I just read a lot of Kickstarters and looked at, what ones were successful, what ones were not. And analyzing, looking at their rewards, what they were offering, and really a lot of them were actually pretty much the same. And so I was actually trying to offer something different, and that's where like the custom cards came in. But that was really interesting research, figuring out what did well, what didn't, and then what I could do different to add to that space. I probably could have talked to more people, though. I think that would have helped a few things.
Yeah.
Well, Gavin, I want to just go back, way back, real quickly, because there was a quick little phrase that you said earlier on in our conversation. You said, at least not at first. And I think we were talking about Kickstarter being, a money-making opportunity. And so I'm curious for you to expand on the not yet. Are there spaces that Kickstarters can expand into that can actually become profitable?
Oh yeah. Like, so, I mean, there's been a lot of Kickstarters where people have made stupid money. Like, it's happened. But what a lot of it is, at least from my observation, has been the ones that really go crazy are the ones that have either an audience off of Kickstarter, or they're ones that have built, a following on Kickstarter. There's actually been quite a few game companies that Kickstarter is basically their business model. Like, there's famously Gloomhaven and Kingdom Death are some really big Kickstarter games that have been like, they've gone gangbusters. Like, certain like you can't with Kingdom Death though. Okay, sorry, I'm getting a little tangential here, but Kingdom Death, I think, was a game that ended up being very successful out of the gate. And a lot of it had to do with they were doing something that was way like higher tier, I guess, than what a lot of people were doing at the time. They had very sophisticated miniatures. The game was like incredible. It was huge. It was almost the first of these like big box games, as I've come to call them, where it's just it's a really expensive game and it's huge. And they were one of the first people to move into that space, and so that product, like, it blew up, right? But a lot of these game companies, they start small, they grow an audience, they continue to deliver on time, they reinvest in themselves, and over time, you end up making more and more money each project. Like, that's really, I think, the goal, right? It's snowballing and bringing more people into your ecosystem. And eventually it's like, yeah, okay, so we didn't make any money on our first game. Maybe our second game will make a little bit of money. Third game will make a little more money. Fourth game, maybe we're making good money. Who knows, right? Like, and there's also a lot of other avenues besides Kickstarter too. At that point, where you have a bunch of product that now you can potentially get on store shelves or whatever you're going to end up doing with it, or market after the fact. But also, the more games you have, the more things you have to sell to the next people that you bring into your ecosystem. So, we have game number 1, game number 2. You're going to be able to add on game number 1, as part of the campaign. So, I feel like I got kind of mixed around there, but
No, not at all. I am just wondering. You spoke mostly in terms of games, but do you think that the
Yeah.
same can be said for artists that maybe aren't putting out? Well, obviously they're putting out a different kind of product. Forgive me, Blake, for putting you on the spot, but
No, it's good. Please.
that actually happens a lot on this podcast. But I think about Blake's project, OmenShard, and there's like a lot of things that could come out of that project. The card deck just being the first one, a board game down the who knows. I'm totally speaking for Blake and his ideas. But just thinking about, the just smaller projects to start with, as part of, a kind of like a larger overarching kind of thing, not necessarily just for the sake of building up a community around a game or a set of games or whatever, but an artist that's trying to just manufacture or construct a following around the broad scope of things that they put out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that kind of what you're talking about applies there as well?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Or Blake?
Yeah, who are you asking?
Well, sorry, now I'm sort of washing all over the place.
No.
That question was directed at Gavin because you were speaking
Okay.
specifically about games. I was just sort of using Blake's project as an example because it has a very wide-ranging sort of like set of applications. But I'm also thinking of just other artists in general outside of games, just generating a community and a following around their work via Kickstarter.
Yeah. So there's sort of this pipeline, I guess, that you can create for yourself where you're kind of trying. This is getting a little bit outside of Kickstarter, but you're almost trying to get like as much of your audience involved at each step as you can. And a lot of artists will start like you make a piece of art, you have a Patreon, right? So you're just getting sort of paid to make the piece of artwork, and then after that piece of art's done, you make prints of it and you sell it at conventions. And then after those you have enough prints, you gather them into a book and you put it on Kickstarter, right? And now you can kickstart this book, and now you have that book now to sell at conventions. And so there's kind of this like stepped process where the more of your audience you can get involved at each of those steps, the more money you're sort of able to make. And this is in terms of just like marketing stuff. Like, I don't know. I feel a little weird being like, well, if just making a bunch of money is your goal, you do it this way. Cause obviously money's important, but it's not everything. So I also like to think about it in terms of like what you can continue to achieve, right? So your first project might be small, but you build on it for the next one and you keep building. You can do more and bigger, interesting things and, reinvest that money again and again and again and end up going where you want to go rather than just being like, well, I'm gonna just make these one-offs. So I think that like, yes, every Kickstarter you do, I think you should kind of think about it in terms of like, okay, well, how does this apply to the next thing, and how can it build on it, and whether it's like, okay, well, I did one book and now I'm going to do the second book, and maybe they're just art books, right? So it's like I have one art book and then the second art book comes out after that, but on the second art book project you can also get the first book, and then now I've got 3 books, and so the third project you can buy 1, 2, or 3 books, or you can get all 3 books in a bundle, right? Like there's all these little sort of things you can do that it builds on itself, as long as you're thinking in those terms. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I think so. Sorry, I premised it so sloppily.
No, that's not good.
But Pro in the chat has an interesting question. How do you combine time working on the product and working on your daily bread income? How do you keep afloat and have time to work on your product? Kind of a time management question.
Blake, you want to go first?
Heavy sigh.
I don't know that I have a very helpful answer to that question. Because I mean, obviously your bills come first, right? There's nothing you can do about that. So I would say either, you need to have some system, if you're by yourself, then, you maybe even take a regular job so that you can save that creative energy for after the fact, which is actually what I had. I had a graphic design job for a long time, and you would think that graphic design is more creative, but I don't know. It was very mindless. So I was able to save all of that creative energy for after hours. I would then go home, have dinner, and then start streaming and just work on my own stuff. And so that worked really well. After I lost that job and started, and then I needed to, do art full time. I probably could have tried to find another job, but I'm like, let's try this out. But now all of that art is, I'm spending my creative pool on that, which isn't a bad thing. It's paying my bills, but then my personal art kind of ends up getting pushed to the side a little bit. So I'm still trying to find that balance of doing both, and it's difficult. But one thing you can do is to try and maximize what you do with your full-time art. For example, all of the commissions that I do are for private clients. I'm not really doing work for companies, so I'm able to retain the rights to almost all of that work, so I can use it for, whatever else I'm doing. Like, for example, I'm working on a painting right now for a client. It's their D&D character, but I'm formatting it in a way that could look good on a card, like a Magic the Gathering card, or as a playmat. So I'm thinking ahead on how to make this piece of work fit on different products so that I can get the most out of the time that I'm putting in, so that I feel less sad about not working on my personal art. But it's all a balance. One thing I'm trying to work out right now is just, scheduling that time. Like Moose keeps telling me, like, dude, just do a power hour during your stream, just 1 hour of personal art. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And then I still haven't, but
it's
one
been
day.
like 5 months.
I know.
We need to have a podcast just where we talk to Moose about all of the reasons why we can't do all the things that he tells us that we should do. Turn this around.
So, I think my, bit of advice in this area is very similar to Blake's, in that early on, it's similar to the sort of same Kickstarter advice, right? Like, your first thing that you're doing might not be making you any money. It's just a matter of snowballing. It's a matter of starting from nothing. That's the hardest part, right? Is when you start from nothing. So, when I switched to being a full-time illustrator, I had a full-time graphic design job. I did a mentorship for 6 months. And that really got me into the routine of what it was going to take for me to make that leap. So I got up, I went to work, I came home, I had an hour after I came home from work, and then I started working on art till midnight, and then I went to bed, and I got up the next day and I did it again. And Saturday and Sunday I worked all day, basically all 14 hours, 16 hours or whatever, was art. And I could only keep that up for 6 months, and I don't want to tell anybody that that's what you have to do, but that is what I had to do at the time to get myself over the hump. Was I needed to build a body of work that was like, okay, I have this work and now I can do something with it. And I did it maybe faster than what other people will need to, because I was like, I've got 6 months, or I've got, it took me, ended up taking me like a year before I moved into full-time illustration. But that I hear this question a lot. There's a lot of people that are like, how do you do this? And I think, to put it as succinctly as possible, it's routine. It's figure out sacred time. That is, I'm working on my product, I'm working on my project, whatever it is. And it's every day. This is the, from this time to this time, this is it. And I'm not doing anything else. All other distractions of my life are pushed to the sides. This is my time to work on this thing.
So basically, don't go to church for your sacred time. Go to work for your sacred time.
Sure.
Well, I think it's also realizing where your time is being spent. How many times a day do you catch yourself just staring at your phone doing this? You add up all of that time, and it could be a pretty significant chunk. Make it a habit almost. Every time you pick up your phone, realize and be like, oh, let's go draw something real quick. Pick up a sketchbook instead, and you'll find that you'll get a lot done doing that.
Also, I would, envy is the thief of happiness, right? Like, I would just ignore social media completely. It's actually what I've started to do this year. I was like, you know what? This is unhealthy. Like, it forces you to compare yourself to other people, and you feel like you're never going to be able to get to where somebody else is, but you're not seeing their struggle. All you're seeing is their highlight reel. And so, I disengaged basically since COVID. I was like, I was also wondering like what it was even adding in terms of value to
Thank you.
me, like as an artist. I was
Yes.
like, this isn't even really like, okay, I post an image and then I'm worried about how many likes it gets, and then when one gets less likes than another, I'm like, was it a bad piece? No,
Yeah.
it's the freaking
Yeah.
algorithm. Like, who cares, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's, and I've got a little bit of a following on Instagram, and it has not done anything for me. That's
So you mentioned never not seeing the work that led up to other people's successes, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's on Instagram or Patreon or their Kickstarter. But one thing that came up in chat earlier was Critical Role. How
Yeah.
3 or 4 years before they put up their Kickstarter, they had been doing content for everybody for free.
Mhm.
And this was also similar with I've seen people doing it with 2D printable minis, where they released hundreds of pieces of free stuff before they even started charging a dime from anybody.
Yeah.
So just have to keep in mind that sometimes you have to do a lot of work for free for people in order for them to support you later.
And for me, I see like there's sort of two paths, right? There's the I'm going to spend a lot of time path, and then there's the I need money to invest path. And neither one of those paths are correct. It's almost like life is pay to win, right? Like, it's frustrating, but it's sort of like you can devote tons and tons of time to get yourself over this hump, or you can work a job and save money and invest that money correctly to get yourself over the hump, right? Like, those are sort of your two options, and you're probably somewhere in the middle of those two things, right? Like, that's going to be time. Obviously, the skill aspect of it is you're not going to be able to pay somebody to upload your brain with how to make art, but that's just going to take time. But as far as I think Kickstarters are concerned, that was more our path. Was we didn't spend a whole lot of time up front, so we knew we were going to have to spend money on advertising.
Right, and I was the opposite. As I was making the thing, I was doing it all live, so
Yeah.
I felt like I didn't have to invest in it later.
Yeah.
Even though I probably should have.
Yeah, I think the combination of both maybe is also.
Absolutely.
I think I
Yeah.
heard it on the 3 Point Perspective podcast that they suggested if you're going to spend money on advertisement, don't spend less than $10,000.
Hard disagree, but yeah.
Well, I guess I'm never advertising.
No, I don't think that's true at all. I think that if you think that you need $10,000 to invest in advertising, or if somebody tells you that you need to hand them $10,000 in advertising, do not do that.
Yeah. What was the context for that? Like what? So, well,
They
first
were
of all,
saying like if you're going to spend less than $10,000, it's not going to have that much of an impact.
what
Yeah,
kind of
Maybe
company?
if you're looking to make $1 million on
Right.
your
What kind of
Kickstarter, I
what kind of
guess,
company
but-
is it that they're doing, or that they run?
That was their art book, I believe.
Yeah, I actually remember them talking about this. I don't remember 100% the context, but it was about Kickstarter. So I come from a marketing background. Like, my graphic design job was for a software as a service company, sort of tech industry thing. And I was very closely connected with their email campaigns and their pay-per-click advertising, and that was sort of the stuff I was doing. So if you understand how Facebook advertising works, you're not going to waste $10,000. Like, you don't even need $10,000. Like, that is just a weird arbitrary number that somebody just said. And I hate being the guy who's like, yeah, whatever, being so anti, but I'm like, look, if you take $500 and you put it in Facebook ads, and you use that $500 to experiment and figure out which of those ads is actually working, and you find one that works, you just push money into that ad as long as it's working. And you're not losing that money. It's an investment. And it doesn't matter if you have 500 or 10,000. It's like you're trying to find that ad that resonates, and then you're pumping money into that ad.
So bringing. Oh, sorry. If you weren't done.
No, that's it. That's a good. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, bringing it back to Kickstarters, what you just said, find the ad that's working in relation, and relating this back to Kickstarters. How would you gauge an ad that is working?
Well, you need to look at like how much it's costing you to get somebody to click on that ad, to take somebody to your Kickstarter, to get somebody to buy your thing. It's cost per acquisition, right? So let's say it costs me 25 cents for somebody to click my ad, but it cost me $5 for somebody to actually buy my game, right? So I'm getting more clicks than I am getting purchases, and that's just sort of how the funnel works. Like each step of the funnel, you're losing people. So if it cost me $5 to get somebody to go from my Facebook ad to my Kickstarter to buy my game, I'm building that now into the cost of my product. So let's say my game cost $5. I spent another $5 getting somebody to buy it. That means my cost of product is $10. So I'm selling it for 15 or whatever. So now I'm making $5 still. I'm still profiting $5. And as long as you're thinking about volume, you can get that margin pretty narrow. Or especially if you're thinking of, I just want to bring people into my Kickstarter. Like we had over 1,200 backers, and we're like, let's just get people in here, even if we're razor thin margins. As long as we're not losing money on these people, we'll keep putting money into that ad. So, it's not like you're just throwing $10,000 out there. That $10,000 will come back, but
You have to be real sure about where you're putting it.
Well, the thing is, Facebook gives you all this data. Like, it's all right there.
Hey, thanks for listening. We continue this conversation in part 2. You can get there immediately by clicking the thumbnail image on the bottom left of this video. And don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a great day.